Welcome to the Brightside. P. Diddy and I'll be missing you. And one person we've been missing for quite a while now is Yeo Sha-En, our happiness scientist, back in the studio. Good morning.
Good morning.
How you
Great
been?
to be back.
You were a little bit unwell last week.
Yeah,
Oh,
just
no.
knocked out. But I
Okay.
just needed that one day of rest.
That's good.
Oh, that's good to hear.
And today you're here to talk to us about dealing with different work personalities. That's a really interesting topic. I mean,
Definitely.
unfortunately, all of us have to work. So better learn about the different personalities and how to work better with everyone. That's always a good thing. Why don't we start off first? How important is it to understand the different kinds of personalities at work?
I mean, when you understand the personalities, I think it's easier to communicate. Communication is always a big thing at work. And if you don't understand, then it's likely that you might have misunderstandings, make certain assumptions, which may or may not be true. And, misunderstandings lead to friction and blah, 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 right? So I think the first basis is understand that not everybody's going to be the same as you. Everybody has different opinions and perspectives. And it's maybe not about right or wrong, but maybe it's like, hey, what do they think? How do they see it? What is their experience? And of course, determine the right or wrong later, but at least, listen first.
Okay, that's a good tip. How can we broadly categorize the different kinds of work personalities that we encounter every day?
Yeah, there's so many personality tests that you could possibly use, MBTI, Enneagram, but at the workplace, I think I see certain types like the driver, the one that's like the push, then the very logical one, like, okay, must go by the rules type, and then the very relational person who like, oh, hey, let's come together, let's work as a team, the one that's always bring people together. And then there are those who just want to get the work done and not really interested in playing a team, but they get their own work done. So there are these different types of personalities, and there's a reason why they all exist in these forms, right? People bring certain mental models to work, certain perspectives, and so they show up as certain ways, right? Like the go-getter is like, I must achieve my goal, I want to get promoted, so they're very driven. So they push, right? And then maybe some of them who are more relational are more like, hey, I think teamwork is the best way to get things done. Maybe in the past they have not been able to get things done on their own, or found themselves burnt. So, they operate in certain ways. So I guess, start with understanding and awareness.
Sha-En, when we have these different personalities at work, our gut instinct might tell us to react in a certain way to these people, but that's not necessarily the right way, is it? What's the smart way to work with different personalities?
I recognize that just as challenging it might be for you to work with someone who's different to you, then for them it's probably the same working with you. And you wouldn't want them to make certain assumptions of you. Right. And so I think it's hold back first and try to stop and think, hey, what is this person actually trying to achieve? Are we actually aligned to the same purpose and goal? Actually, you might be, it's just your approach is different. And then check in with them and say, hey, when you did this, can you help me to understand what's going on here? And then maybe once you hear them out, it might be helpful.
Oh, wow. There's so much to dive into for this topic. We're going to find out more as we chat with Sha-En on our Facebook Live. Come and join us at 1FM at 91.3 at facebook.com/1FM 913. Hey everybody, how's it going on this Monday? And yes, so good to have you back, Sha-En. You are
Thanks for
looking
having
well,
me.
bubbly. Oh, the glow from your face.
Good enough sleep, It's like the most important thing these days.
Yeah.
What's that like, Sha-En?
Sleep.
You see, like,
Rub it in.
I'm sure sleep is also a factor in terms of our work styles. And
Singapore is one of the most sleep-deprived countries, right? And so sometimes when you get to work, you're already on edge.
Yeah.
You're not well rested, and I guess that it ends up we make a lot of judgments sometimes.
Wow, you haven't been there at 6 a.m, have you, with us?
That could drastically affect your work personality.
For sure.
What do you mean?
I want to ask something. You mentioned about the different sort of like personality tests that you can take. Do you feel that, before anybody joins a new organization, joins a new team, everybody takes the test and then we find out where we are?
I think it's useful, right? Not that I want to categorize. I think we must be mindful that personality tests can put people into boxes, and just because you've done a test doesn't mean you are set for life in that personality.
So you can change.
But there are inclinations, right? So for example, MBTI is like introversion, sensing, judging. Maybe naturally that's how you perform, but in a certain context, those personalities could shift because people adapt to the workplace situation that they're in. So boxing people in is not helpful, but as a first indicator, you can get a sensing, and that's helpful, right? Because then it's like, oh yeah, this person really wants to have a bit more space, so let's give that person some space and come back to them maybe a bit later, and then we can continue the discussion, for example. Or some people are just more structured by nature, and if you give them a broad vision of what you want to achieve with no structure, they're probably not going to thrive. So it really helps to understand, because then you know how to communicate, you know how to delineate tasks or whatever it is you need to do together, and that really moves things forward, right? Without that, you're like shooting in the dark sometimes, and then you figure out when they have a response that you know, it's not otherwise nice to you or whatever.
What are some of the kinds of examples of misunderstandings that can take place as a result of not acknowledging the different kinds of personalities?
Yeah, so I think I was working with a team recently, and there's some people who are very forward and very honest, but then they rub a person who is very, maybe a bit more empathetic, sensitive, who needs a little bit more assurance, right? And so that brash personality kind of rubbed against this person who just needed that softer touch. And so they got into this argument, like he doesn't care about my feelings, for example. And then he was saying, she mimi mama, then still cannot get to the point. But actually, it's just that they're different personalities. So if I was the direct one, I would say, hey, you know, I'm going to be direct here, and I'm going to let you know only because we need to get to this point as quickly as possible. So sometimes prefacing it will help the other person to receive it better. And then the person who maybe needs a bit more time would say, hey, you know, I just need maybe 2 to 5 minutes or whatever time you need to process this a bit more, and then I'll get back to you. So it's also conveying to the person who needs things done quickly that it's not like I'm just sitting here as a sitting duck. I just need that time a little bit more. And then, you know, if that communication goes well, then hey, everybody understands where they are, and it's not like you're left hanging. I think people don't like to be left in the dark, right? And so, you know, that prevents some misunderstandings.
I'm assuming, like, when we have these sort of workplace differences, I mean, I guess there's two ways of looking at it, right? One is, let's not bring this up and kind of just work together and paper over the cracks and just get on with it. Or the other one is, let's sit down and kind of thrash it out. I mean, what for you is the best way to address these differences?
I think people avoid conflict a lot in workplaces that I've seen. And so things that they're not satisfied with, they just keep quiet first, and they hope that it will blow over.
Right.
But I think if it's something that's happened repeatedly and it's affecting both your work performance or the ability for the team to work together or your well-being, like every day you sian because like I don't know how to confront this issue, then I think it's something to bring to the table. Of course, it's scary, and I mean, difficult conversations are always scary, but just think about the bigger picture. If you don't bring this up, what is the consequence? Right? So I was working with a team recently, and there was this underlying current of tension, right? And it's because everybody's holding back from saying what they want to say.
Right.
But then we said, okay, let's think about it. Let's bring it here in a safe space. Let's create the parameters for safety, meaning that we're going to talk about it, but we're not going to be personally attacking anyone. The objective here is to bring it up so that we can talk through it, process it, and resolve it for the better good of the team unity. And so if you bring this big picture there, I think everybody will feel like, okay, it's not about me, it's about the team. Right, and if that's the bigger picture, they probably will feel like, okay, it's worth getting through it in order to get where everybody wants to go. Yeah.
We're going to share some comments from our Brightsiders. Guys, thank you so much for tuning in. And from Alun, he says, you know, I always try not to be condescending. And then there's this guy who always ends with, you get what I mean? At the end of every line. Can you ever make that sound nice? Do you get what I mean? I don't know. But understand, he says, I understand that it's just a filler because of, you know, vocab, but literally every line gets, you know, that filler, and it gets a bit tiring and sore for the ears. 10 years of working together. He says his ears have already wilted. You have a suggestion to how he can deal with that?
Well, again, if it were me and it really gets on my nerves, I think one day when you're out for coffee with this person, like, hey, you know, I noticed that, you know, you use this phrase quite often. You know, I just say, I notice. It's not like, hey, why you keep saying this? Because the moment you point at the person, they will be like, why cannot? You know, then you have this defense mechanism. But say, hey, I'm noticing this. Is this something that you notice? Do you know, it's like just bring it up casually, and the person say, sometimes they're not even aware because like you say, it's a full stop to them. It's the way they punctuate their sentences.
See, this is
Right.
much better. I would have just said, yeah, I get it. I get what you mean. It's all right.
But you
Well,
get
you
it,
could go that route too.
Oh, but that's interesting. A good thing that you pointed out about how people might not be aware, right? Because we always think like, how can that person not
Yeah.
Like
know?
there are a lot of people who say, all right. They will say, all right,
All right,
right, all
yeah.
right.
Yeah,
Then it's
true.
like, no, it's
That's
wrong,
true.
right? But sometimes they don't even aware.
It's a
This
verbal.
is just the way
Yeah.
that. Correct.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. So it's not really questioning you, like, do you get what I mean? I think it's just like, that's just the person's way. It sounds like it. If it's
Right.
going on for 10 years, it's a habit.
It's probably a habit rather than, oh, you're not really understanding me.
Right,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
Yeah.
We've got a bit of a praise coming from Daniel. He also says that, my boss is the most capable one. You see, so cute. He's praising his boss. He says, once I was having my appraisal with her, I told her, it's really difficult to manage people, different genders, ages, personalities. And she said, you know what? And then he thought to himself, she actually handles a whole operation. And here I am already facing difficulties handling a team. Wow, hats off to the boss.
Yeah, I think it's also the mindset. Are we going in thinking that it's difficult? Because the moment you think that it's difficult, it's going to be.
Right.
Our mind has a self-fulfilling mechanism, right? And sure, granted, there are some really challenging personalities. But what if we were to pause and say, well, what would make it less difficult? Or what if this was not difficult? How would I handle it? What would be the first step? And people are people, right? I think sometimes when we go into this mode of it's difficult, we already create an internal barrier. And that makes it hard for us to bring anything up. But what if this person was just difficult, and think about what's the reason why. Maybe they have been attacked before. Maybe they just there's a lot of pressure, like a lot of middle managers or even bosses, they're under a lot of pressure to hit KPIs, so they come across as difficult.
Right.
But is it because they just have some other pressure they need to, so there's certain assumptions that we are making of these difficult personalities. So if we remove those, actually they're just people. Right?
Yeah, I think there are different stresses that can happen in a person's life on a day-to-day basis,
Yeah,
and I think the
exactly.
awareness of that is also very critical.
Yeah, absolutely.
Instead of rather putting someone in a box and just deciding that this person is difficult or being whatever, but you know
Yeah.
what? It's actually what's going on in this person's life as well that we should also be taking into context, right?
Yeah.
There are so many different kinds of personality profile assessments. Maybe we'll come to that back on air.
Yep.
But we just want to wonder if we are wondering if you have a preference for any one of these assessments that could help us out at work.
Yeah, I mean, depends on whether you want the paid or not paid. But I mean, there's
Let's start with not paid.
the not paid one.
We will talk more about
Yeah,
that as we head
for sure.
back on air. Come and join us as we go live on 1FM 91.3.
One FM 91.3 Good Times Greatest Hits. Sheila E. and the Glamorous Life. Talking about Shehzad over there leading the glamorous life.
You get what I mean, though. You get what I mean. Right? You do. Okay.
All right.
We are chatting with Yeo Sha-En, our happiness scientist, back in the studio with us, talking about how to work with different kinds of work personalities.
You know what, Carol? I just realized that the discussion topic you brought up today is going to be the new personality assessment tool. We were asking people what dish best describes your personality.
Yeah.
So now we must write up a new tool.
That should be, yes,
Yeah,
our
that'd
new
be fun.
assessment tool based on a dish.
Yeah.
So-
what dish you pick? for
Sean,
yourself?
what are you? Come on.
All right. I
Let's
say
get to pick a
sambal
dish.
belacan.
Fiery.
Go on.
Chili padi. I'm a peranakan.
Hey,
Right.
high five, Felanonia.
So last night
You're
we were
not
just
a
having
fiery
lontong
person.
for dinner. Then my auntie was like, hey, must have the belacan. Then all of us were like, confirm must have
Yes.
belacan. No, belacan cannot eat one. The lontong is
Yeah.
like, it just doesn't taste the same.
It makes the dish come
Are
alive.
you really a fiery person, Sean?
I can be.
Really?
Yeah,
Interesting.
don't
We
push
haven't
my
seen this
buttons.
side.
Passionate.
Actually, my
passionate
nickname growing
person.
up was Chili Padi.
Oh,
Serious?
Yeah.
Oh.
But I think I've mellowed over age. I was a very angsty, angry young person.
You've removed the seeds, have you?
yeah.
Yeah? Okay.
Now no
Alright.
kick already. Now only,
Ayo,
now only the shock
no.
without the kick.
That's still very good.
All
Not
right.
bad.
Hey, catch her on the wrong side of bed.
I get
one
what you
day,
mean.
then
Oh, warning.
We'll see what happens. So, Sha-En, there's so many different kinds of personality profile assessments, like the Gallup Strength Finder, the DISC profiling, the Enneagram, Myers-Briggs, and what have you. What can we draw from these different assessments, and do you have a preference for any one of these tools?
I mean, there are different ways of looking at the personality. So if you look at Gallup and another one that I like to use, which is the VIA, values in action. Those are based on strengths. So the Gallup is about workplace strengths, and it was designed as a workplace tool,
Like a
And
connector.
yeah, correct. How do you operate?
Yeah.
Whereas the VIA is more about your personality. It's like humility is a value that you have, right? So that's more. And then say MBTI is more about introversion, extroversion, sensing versus judging. So they're just different ways of how people operate. And then DISC, of course, it's like conscientiousness and things like that. So if you look across all the different personality tests, you'll realize there are different dimensions that are being measured. Now the question maybe is, which one should I use? Should I use all of the above? Okay, if you are fanatic, yeah, please go ahead. But if you really just want one or two, I would say maybe one or two. One maybe about the personality of the person, and maybe one about how they operate, because then you can put 2 and 2 together and see like, hey, how does this value, for example, show up in the way that they operate, right? And that may give you a bit more fullness in, again, understanding the person. Yeah.
Thanks for that. Yeah.
Well, I'd like to thank our resident Chili Padi for spicing up our morning with some great thoughts.
I have a feeling Shehzad's never going to forget that.
I don't forget much. No, but it's been really interesting because different work personalities is something that we all have to negotiate, and you've given us plenty of food for thought. Couldn't
Time
resist.
for lontong breakfast.
Oh, this is very mean. We can't do that for another hour and a half.
Send along. Next time, bring the belacan here.
Bring the belacan.
yes.
That would be
Whether they will
Sha-En's
approve of the
tagline.
smell, I don't know.
Bring the
Fine.
belacan.
It's
Yeah.
fine. It's
Thank
fine.
you so much once again,
You're
Sha-En.
welcome.
Good times. Greatest